GMAT Club, and we have welcome to a session today, which I hope not just the people on that I'm going to be talking to for profiles, but all of you out in GMAT Club land around the world will benefit from. And the point of this is to do some profile reviews. We have 3 people with us. I have Josh, Stephanie, and Panit, and we're going to go one by one into their profiles and probably take about 10 minutes each, and then we will have some questions from everyone. So you can write your questions in the chat and then I'll address them, but we'll try to sort of go in order and take it one by one. I also want to, I mentioned this to my host, but I want to wish everyone out here who is watching and listening, I hope you are well. I hope that COVID is not affecting you too much, and let's hope that we're going to get to the other side of this soon, because I think we can all agree it stinks. So with that, let's talk about the profiles. We have these 3 people. So first is Josh. So Josh, we have the background here. Do you want to just say in a minute, I'll give you your elevator pitch to practice. Tell everybody just a little bit about yourself, and then I'll go and ask you some questions. Okay.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for having me here. My name is Josh. I'm an Army vet, currently working at a Fortune 500 consulting company, specialized in implementing digital transformation projects and working with global consumer product companies. So as you can see on the screen, my GMAT is 760. I'll have about 6 years of experience by the time I start school, hopefully next fall. And my post MBA goal is currently, but strategy consulting. So I'm shooting for the big firms, and just want to hear your thoughts on my profile and school choices, Donna.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing, and thank you all for being so brave and putting your your information out there. And I'm going to try to do the best I can to share with you. I used to be on the school side looking at candidates' profiles, so I look at people not just with a consultant's mind, but also how a school looks at people. So let me start and tell you some of the things that people would be excited, like the things that I wrote as your pluses, Josh. Certainly 760 GMAT, can't ignore that. That is definitely a positive. First generation immigrant, and was that first generation college too?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a big plus that certainly schools like to see. Your military service is a plus. The self-made story and the fact that you were involved in giving back in that military employee resource group, those were things that stuck out to me as positives. The piece that is sort of in the grade C of blah, if you will, and by that I don't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It's just that we're trying to figure out ways to make you different and unique, because when you say that I want to do strategy consulting, and then my tip for you is, even if you want MBB, think about if I had a nickel for every time I read somebody's profile that said I want to do MBB, right, I would be very wealthy. And it doesn't take a lot of effort to come up with that. Just about anybody could come up with that. So what I feel like is missing, and I think it's there, and this is the job that you have to mine it out, is, first of all, why is consulting so what is it? Is there something that really drives that interest, that makes you more interesting than just someone who says I want to be a consultant? So let me ask you that.
Right. Yes. So I'm currently working in consulting, but more on the functional side. And I think the one thing I find it really interesting is the opportunity of working with various companies, right? Like, unlike a traditional regular job, you work at one company. Here, you are able to see and get a lot more experience in a lot shorter time. I think strategy consulting will give me will be a stepping stone, right, for me to go later on into industry. And and allow me to see the bigger picture.
Okay. So let me ask you this. What you just said, thousands of people could say.
Right.
So what we want to do is try to dial in. When I look at your background, I say, okay, you have military background, obviously military expertise.
Right.
So that as an industry, if you're interested in the defense industry, that is a leg like you bring. So what you want to do is think about what is it in my prior background that I have that can that I can bring to add value. So if I was going to work in consulting, I'd have some expertise around in the defense industry. There is some work that you're doing now. It looks like this multinational sports fashion company. So maybe there's some retail industry expertise. Is there something that you want to leverage in terms of industry expertise that could help? And that also, when you think about that industry expertise, that's the piece where that could potentially inform some of your school choices.
Yes, I think my experience project-wise has been in consumer product and retail.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and being able to see the end-to-end process
Mm-hmm.
of how a product goes from the factory to the consumer is definitely my well, I find that very interesting, and I
Okay.
do want to. I think the target long term is to go into consumer product industry.
Okay.
And,
So
yeah.
then it sounds like even though you have this military background, you're really looking to leverage the fact that you have work experience around retail and understanding the product life cycle. And you want to
Right.
bring that in. So then when you think about that, so this is you might think about, okay, how can I leverage my retail and my consumer product knowledge so that I can develop that even further. And so when we start to look at schools, for example, Wharton has that Baker Retail Center, right? So you might do some extra research about that and see if there's some resources there that could help you. That would be something that would, again, be a reason. Wharton is very specific. You really have to do your homework on Wharton about why, how they can help you. So that could be something to look into and leverage. It also, you didn't mention, um, you know, you have Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, and again, that you might as well. That's the MBB, if you will, of business schools. And again, it's not to say that that's bad to have those as goals, but if you're trying to leverage that retail piece, I would go deeper and then look at also some schools. For example, UCLA Anderson has a really strong retail business association, has some resources that could be valuable. So you want to look at some of those schools. You also want to look at schools that have strong experiential learning. Um, Michigan Ross, with the MAP program is something. Tuck has a known to have sort of experiential learning and lots of opportunities. Fuqua has consulting practicum that you could get some experience. So you want to, because what you need is an MBA program that's going to help you um, get the reps, if you will, in consulting, so that you really are ready to be able to. Not that you don't have that, you have some obviously consulting that you have now, but to make that strategy move, you want to
Right.
be able to find a school where you're going to get a chance to do a lot of that, even beyond your internship. So I would say those are the things. So, in terms of Harvard, um, Harvard historically has liked people who have a military background, and there's lots of leadership opportunities in military. So, I could say that nobody. I was just having this conversation with my close colleague and friend Jennifer Jackson, who is a Harvard alum. We were talking about who did and didn't get interviews for Harvard, and she was saying, nobody should expect to get an interview with Harvard because it's just the way it is. That being said, I think if you were going to shoot for a school like Harvard, I would want to see something more. I mean, there's a lot of drive in you, actually, right? To kind of join the military. It looks like, and it doesn't say for sure, but it seems like I saw somewhere you have a background. Like, did you spend your childhood in China?
Yes, I grew up
Okay.
there.
So that's an interesting story, right? That's a very interesting story. What it was that got you to go from um, China to end up in the U.S. military to end up in the United States and be the first one in your family to go to college. Lots of leadership there, forging a path that no one ever had. So I would say digging into some of that story and sharing some of that with schools could make a difference. With Stanford, I think that, it's change lives, change organizations, change the world. It's those people who have some deep burning um, thing they want to make right in the world. And that's not to say that you couldn't. I'm never like to be in the business of crushing anyone's dreams. So you should apply to every school that you want to apply to. But I don't hear some big burning pressing dream that you're trying to solve that makes me think that you're gonna, that Stanford is the place where I would put lots of time and energy if I were you. That doesn't mean again that you shouldn't try, but if you are going to do that, I'd really dig into that what matters most. And certainly that what matters most is something that helps you to be successful in all your other applications because and I know we have to go on to the next profile pretty soon, but I would say tapping into what it is about that, seeing a product go from nothing, from being made to being sold, and what excites you about that, and maybe how that weaves into your story of maybe, how you came to this country. If you can share more of that, then I think that that's going to be where magic happens for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, that was
So,
really helpful.
yeah. Someone said, how about Chicago Booth for Josh? So Chicago Booth is a great school for consulting, and so is Kellogg. And as a Kellogg alum, I guess I feel like I have to get that plug in every time I talk about the Chicago schools. But no, I think both of those schools could be very interesting options for you. And then again, if you felt like you ever wanted to leverage some of the military background, some other schools that I thought of that are particularly military friendly, Darden, UNC Kenan Flagler, Cornell could also be schools where you might find that your profile is appealing. But I think you have a bright future. I do think that there's an MBA school in your future. And I think a lot of it has to do with seeing if you can create the unique part that only you can say and not try to avoid the things that millions and thousands of other people could say. Okay?
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Sure. So the next one on our list is Panit. Panit is coming from India. And so he's having, as Josh is just having his morning coffee, Panit is having his sort of evening dinner. So it's amazing how we sort of like span the world on GMAT Club. So I'm going to do the same thing. Panit, why don't you introduce the GMAT community to yourself, and then I'll go in to make my notes and we'll have a conversation. Okay?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Panit. I'm based out of the pink city of India, Jaipur. And about my background, graduation, I did my mechanical engineering in 2016. And for the past 4 years, I've been working in project management, basically working from execution, pipeline execution, moving on to planning those projects. So I'm basically working for the past 3 years in core strategic roles in this company that's based out of New Delhi, NCR.
Okay. All right.
And about my goals, about my post MBA goals. I'm looking to, just like Josh, I'm looking to work as a strategy consultant for big firms like MBBs and the Big Fours, maybe. And my long-term goal is to build a team around, an analytical team around community development.
Okay. All right.
So,
All right. And so in reading your background and knowing that you work for, an oil and gas industry,
yeah.
I don't know if I'm just breathing this in, but I felt like there was a whiff of sort of sustainability interest in your background and profile. Is that true?
It is because natural gas is the near future before we transition into electrical energy. So
Okay.
that's the next future right now.
So I would say again, the thing about consulting is you always want to, it's just, you've got to be a little bit more specific to make it interesting and also to make it someone sort of connect to your story. And this is some advice that I think is going to be helpful for all of you and all of you out in GMAT club land. I have been taking some storytelling facilitation classes over the last couple months as part of my pandemic, make myself better in the downtime. And Esther Choi, who wrote a book called Let the Story Do the Work, it's a Kellogg alum. So these are ideas that she shared with me from her book and her class, but I find them extremely valuable in working with my MBA clients. When you think about, there's like 3 circles. There's these, the outer circle would be kind of what you do or your credentials. So it's like, it's interesting, but it's very easy to find because it's on your resume, it's on your LinkedIn profile, it's out there.
Yeah.
When you get into that middle circle, it gets a little warmer. And this is where you are saying, well, how good are you at what you do? And actually, Panit, one of the things I have as a comment on your resume is you need to do a better job on your resume of showing results and showing how you got things done, and making it a little clearer and easier to do. So that's something, for you to work on your profile. But that starts to get warmer into a school seeing who you are, because it's not just, okay, you're a consultant, there's all kinds of consultants, but how good a consultant are you? Are you actually getting things, are you doing things X% faster? Are you saving money? Are you generating new revenue? These things are important. So schools want to see your impact. So that gets into the middle and we get warmer. But where you really, let's say where you really make connections with people is in the middle, in that sweet spot. And this is the why you do what you do and who you are and what is your character, like what makes you get up in the morning, right? And so, Panit, if there's something about, if you're seeing the evidence, and let's face it, we're all seeing the evidence of the horrible climate mess we're in, if there's something that you can connect to that says, this is why I'm now working in gas, and this is what I want to do, and this is the world I want to see, and you can help someone connect on. So if you can think about personal stories where, that becomes clearer, that's when schools start to care more about your mission and who you are. One of my biggest success stories ever, as I remember, I worked with an Indian man who had, less than average GMAT scores for these top schools, and he was successful getting into Wharton. I think it was a 710 he had, and I think in large part because, and not great grades, was because his mission was bigger than him. It was about how he wanted to go back and invest in the companies in India that were actually going to create more opportunity and more opportunities for people to be in middle class. And so you don't have a GMAT score yet, right?
I do. It says that I have a 680 GMAT. I'm planning to retake in the next
Okay.
1 month.
Say what? You have a 630?
680.
680. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you right now what I would do if I were you and I was trending at 680 in the profile of Indian male. I would make a pretty quick pivot over to the GRE. I'd ride on the GRE train, okay? Because I don't think, unless you're able to, jump that up to say 730 or 740 or something like that, it's going to be a rough road in the 680 land in GMATs for Indian males. But in the GRE world, or some schools are even looking at the EA, you might want to do that. And the reason being, if it's not going to be a super strength, you might want to just be in a different pool where, the GRE scores, you're probably going to be a little bit higher percentage wise in the pool, and that's going to help you. So that's something to think about. But that, beyond that, because we can't change the score you have. I mean, you can keep working on it, but let's assume whatever the score it is, what I'm trying to help you with on the admissions consulting side is, how do we get them to fall in love with you so they're not even remembering what your score is at all, right? Because what you want to do is so important, and it's going to make the world a better place, that they want to help you get there. Okay. And so one of the reasons I picked your profile to put on here, as opposed to many others, is Indian male who is not saying, I want Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, where you're talking about picking out like the needle, the golden, the Willy Wonka chocolate ticket, whatever. You've got schools like Emory, Fuqua, Tepper, Johnson. These are schools, and these are still not easy schools to get into, but these
Yeah.
are schools where you may have more of a chance, right? So for example, with Emory, I think, if you do more research, you learn more about what they're doing with sustainability. You know the names of the centers. Fuqua is very much, they have that Center for the Advancement of Social Enterprise case. And the way Fuqua asks their admissions questions, they ask you the 25 random, not so random things. But they then ask you 3 ways you're going to engage. So that's a case where you have a chance to really do your homework, and you can get an A+ in really talking to students at Fuqua and finding out what kinds of ways, they have an energy edge. They've got some really interesting resources. So if you take the time to go deep and really understand how you can make a contribution there, you can shine. You can also, the window for this is passed for this year, but I think for people who want to go to Fuqua, it really the early bird gets the worm. So it really pays to do your research in that early round 1. They have that early round. If you know that Fuqua is the school that you want, you can apply even in September, and I think you get, I think you get a fair shake in every round, but I think you get a little extra consideration if you're in that early group, or if you're able to sign up early enough where you can actually get an interview. So there are a couple schools that do that, like Tuck, UNC Kenan-Flagler, Fuqua, where if you're early enough, you can at least have the chance to make your case, and for someone to hear your story, as opposed to waiting and being like anonymous and hoping you get that interview invitation. So you can control the narrative a little bit more that way. So those were some things that, again, connecting maybe around sustainability. I also mentioned, you might look at some schools like McCombs or Rice in addition to that, where you might, places that are in Texas where there's a lot going on and a lot of knowledge and things about energy. So you might look at that. But then I would go through these schools and really learn more about how they're helping, what kind of resources they have, sustainability conferences, centers, energy conferences, things like that, and really go deep and talk to students. And again, hope that by doing all of that, you become human, and they connect with you of what really drives you and motivates you. And then, that's where those, again, miracles and, things happen, where you sort of exceed expectations, and it's not just driven by my GPA is this and my test scores are this. And I did notice you had a very strong entrance test score, so ability, proven quantitative ability there. But so any questions, and is that helpful?
Yeah, that was really insightful and really helpful. I need to work on the core and the fit. What do you call the fit? Is what I need to work on.
Yep.
The core, the why,
Yep.
why this school, and why
Yes.
do you want to do what you want to do.
Yep.
I got
And
that.
when you,
Very thank you
you're
for
welcome.
that insightful.
Perfect. Okay, so then Stephanie, very nice to meet you and talk to you. I'll do the same thing. Your background's out there, but let's give you a chance to practice your 1-minute elevator pitch also, which is an important part of admissions, and just share with our audience a little bit more about your background, and then I'll jump in.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, Donna and GMAT Club. My name is Stephanie. I am from New York State originally. I went to the University of Michigan and I studied English literature. I always wanted to work in retail, though. My email address, the first one I made in 3rd grade, had to do with fashion. So after graduating, I came back to New York, moved to New York City. I've lived here for 6 years, and I've worked at 2 very exciting retail startups, both that grew from smaller companies with about 30 stores to multinational companies. So I've seen 2 companies grow in a huge way, and I've been working in merchandise planning, which is a lot of Excel analysis. It's analyzing which styles are doing better than others and why, and kind of digging into a lot of data, a lot of problem solving and analysis. I love retail. I want to stay in retail, so I'm really focused on my long-term goal, which is retail entrepreneurship. I know so much of the product lifecycle, kind of thinking about Josh's background or Josh's goals in the future. That's what I know so well. What I don't know is marketing and finance. So I'm thinking I'll go earn my MBA, get more of a foundational business knowledge, understand finance, work in a marketing role immediately after MBA, And then my long-term goal is to run my own company. I love the idea of sustainability. I love the idea of social impact. So in a perfect world, I would create a company like Allbird that kind of, I want my MBA program. I want to dive into entrepreneurship, dive into experiential learning, and kind of test out a few ideas before.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for that background. And again, I'm so interested. And maybe it's funny. I don't know that I meant to actually pick so many people who had sort of a retail passion. But just hearing you talk about your story, and I think I was intrigued by the Untuck It brand when I saw that. Talk about a company that has, I mean, I guess at least they're casual, so they've got to be doing better than Brooks Brothers. But let's face it, retail clothing has not been a banner year for retail, and I think that a lot of business schools are going to like people who are in this industry right now, because it means you have to be plucky and scrappy and figure out how to pivot and do things in a completely different way. And I'm sure you've had to change your product mix. I'm actually excited. I just bought I bought this new jacket today online just recently. I mean, no one's bought any clothes, right? For like last year, we're all just in our jammies all year. So I think you're in a really exciting industry and an exciting time, and that you'll have a lot to talk about when you do your interviews with schools. And so that's something. So I made a list of positives for you. The retail experience that you have. I see in your resume, you great examples of driving results, showing me how you've pivoted, even in, I see lots of promotions in both of your jobs, 2 promotions in both jobs. So that's something schools like to see, that progression. So for both of you, Josh and Panit, you want to highlight, if you can, where you have progressed in an organization. That's something schools like to see. Female, it's always, and I feel like at the same time, everybody, we are what we are, and we all have to be like, we can't worry so much about that. So I don't want to harp on that. Nobody can change what they are, but there is a push to have more parity in MBA programs. So I'll talk to you about some ideas there. I think the fact that you have liberal arts background is a plus, because again, schools are looking for, they don't want everybody to be the same. They don't want to hire all the undergraduate business majors who work in consulting to go to be in the business school. They want people who have different undergraduate backgrounds. And what struck me on your resume, what I highlighted was, again, even since this, pandemic, Stephanie has actually been involved in this thing called What's Open NEV, and it's basically cataloging what businesses are open during quarantine in New York City. So already doing stuff to help. And then the other one that's really cool is rescuing leftover cuisine, figuring out ways to get all this food that's going to waste into the hands of people that are needing food. And never in any of our lives, I think, have we seen a time where everything is so chaotic. So I think the fact that you've, and sometimes people say, oh, you don't want to start, like, if people get involved in activities within a year of applying, it looks like it's just trying to pander to get involved. But you know what? We're in the middle of like really horrible times. And I'm impressed that you've just jumped right in and like actually, help figure out ways to help people. So there's, even in pandemic, even in lockdown, even though that a lot of this is probably virtual that you're doing, or maybe just, independent tasks of getting things done. I think that the fact that you've been able to show that you're like helping your community even now in the midst of going through difficult things is something that will stand out and schools will really like. So a couple things that I think are concerns, or not concerns, but things that you would want to work on. So your GPA is a 3.1, which is perfectly fine GPA, but it's not a problem GPA, but it's not a GPA that's going to like save the day for you. And then your GMAT score is, kind of right in the middle there too, where it's, I shouldn't say in the middle, it's a very good score. But in this very competitive world, it's not going to stand out there either. So what you could potentially do, and as an former admissions person, I would be saying, gee, I wonder, since you were liberal arts, have you taken any quantitative courses? Are you going to be able to handle the rigor of a quantitative program? Yes, I see that you do a lot of Excel work, so I know that you have some familiarity, but what you could do even in the next 6 months while you're applying or whenever it is that you are applying, is maybe take something like MBA math to show a school that you actually can do, that you're prepared for sort of those prereq courses. If you, I didn't see the breakdown on your GMAT in terms of verbal versus quantitative, but was the verbal not as strong or stronger than the quantitative?
So I had a wonderful verbal score. I want to say 90th percentile. It's really the quant that
Yep.
I struggled with. And
Yep.
I'll tell you, Donna, I actually took the UC Berkeley Math for Management course, the extension one, and I got an A. But I wonder, is getting one A in one course enough to kind of, is
Well,
it because the GMAT is obviously more important?
Yes. So obviously the GMAT's more important, but I think schools are also looking for people to say, you know what, I have self-awareness. So I recognize that this is a potential weakness, and at least I've done something. So taking one course, and I think the Berkeley and the UCLA extension courses where you can take them and get a grade. So you don't want to take some Coursera course where it just says you did it and there's no grade. You want to be able to show a school, yes, I took a real course and I got a real grade. And if you're going to do it for your purposes, that grade should be an A. So you're taking that, and one is better than zero, and it shows a school that you have self-awareness to realize this was a weakness. This is something I need to work on. You can certainly continue, if you have time, to take another course, or you could do something like MBA math, which is kind of an online module that says these are some of the things that, people expect everybody to have off the gates, to be successful, and to know that you have that. So that would be something else, like an admissions person would say, well, at least I see that she's doing that. So, so that's probably the biggest weakness that I see in your profile. And in terms of the schools, let me get into that. So because you then have this, retail passion and focus, that was actually missing. And this is something good for people to think out there, out in GMAT land. When you start to think about, can I get into this school? And here I am, and here's my test scores, and here's my grades. The other really important piece is, what do you want to do? Because you shouldn't just say, I want to go to business school and I'm looking at these are the top 5 programs, so I just want to go to the top 5 programs, without saying, but wait, you really should all be doing kind of a gap analysis for yourself and saying, for me to get to that next level and be successful in that short-term goal that I have, what is it that I don't have? So for example, Stephanie, while you have been, managing budgets, managing some people, you do have some business experience, you have a gap, and you really don't have that formal business background. So an MBA program is going to be able to give you more tools around analysis, around, customer and data analytics. You want to have more finance knowledge so that you can, understand budgeting and understand, P&L better. So that those are the things that you need. And then you want to look at, and then you also know that you want to really broaden and deep dive even more in retail. So then you say, okay, let me look at the schools that are going to give me, obviously all business schools are going to give you sort of a core foundation and solid business education, but certainly some of the schools that I've circled UCLA, Anderson again for their retail, actually Columbia also, and Stern for that matter. And actually for you, I don't think that the 1 year Stern fashion luxury goods MBA is probably makes sense. It might be a little bit too narrow, maybe around fashion, like, and luxury goods per se, but I think that, looking at schools in New York City, so obviously Stern and Columbia would be the ones to look at. That makes a lot of sense. Looking at Anderson, looking at Wharton, maybe as a stretch school, but at least looking at it. I also, it's funny in terms of experiential learning, and then also just kind of, it's interesting, you don't have Harvard, Stanford, Wharton here. And this is just I somehow have coined the nice belt. And that's not to say that all schools aren't nice, but starting with Haas, Ross, Kellogg, Tuck, Fuqua, those schools tend to be very teamwork oriented and very collaborative and experiential learning. And I find that there's a personality type of people that often look at those schools. And while that's not necessarily directly overlaying on your retail focus, you might also sort of look at the fusion of schools within the nice belt and the and experiential learning in retail. So that would be the things that I mentioned. And then also when I looked on your, I looked at all of your LinkedIn profiles, and it may be that you're just hidden right now for, I'm not quite sure, but when you go live into active MBA admissions, I think I don't know if your profile, there was no picture. So maybe it's the way the settings are for someone who's not in your network. So you might check that. Again, it's going to be, some schools actually ask you for the LinkedIn profile so they'll find you, but you definitely want them to see a picture when you're actually actively applying, and you want to have your profile maxed out. I don't think all of you had 500 plus connections. So if you don't yet have 500 plus, keep working to get those. Another tip that I'll give all of you is that nothing drives admissions people crazier than when the dates don't quite match on LinkedIn versus what they're on your resume. So go through with a fine tooth comb and don't give them any reason to doubt either space. Right. So those are things that you want to do. And again, not every school is going to have time or is going to look at your LinkedIn profile, but if they do, you want to make sure that it's something that, sells your story even more. So, if you have great recommendations from people that, used to manage you, that you have there when someone goes to your site and sees it, go ahead and make those things there. I'm getting my note that it's time for Q&A. So hopefully that was some global information, but hopefully, Stephanie, does that give you some further things to think about?
Yeah, absolutely. That actually makes me feel a lot better about my GPA, it's not as glaring of an issue as I may have thought. And I also didn't realize how important LinkedIn could be. So I will absolutely be checking mine after this.
Perfect. So let's see if there's other questions. And then also, if any of you have questions, because I have a feeling that your questions are going to be similar to the questions that other people in our audience have. So based on the conversation we have so far, what are some further questions? Oh, actually, I have one that's just jumped in. Do most schools have the option of English language waiver? I understand some schools are adamant that, but how about the majority specialty schools? So I basically that question is really, it's most schools, if you did not do, for US MBA programs, if you did not do your education in English, you're going to have to take either TOEFL or another language proficiency test to be able to get in, through the admissions process. So and that's something that you really just have to go school by school and find out what their requirements are. And then another one is in transition of function from credit analyst, so finance and risk management, to investment banking. If I get into Big Four, will I start as a fresher or an experienced finance professional? So, I think when someone, so if you're talking about, if you want to get into investment banking, a lot of people who go into investment banking obviously did analyst type work prior to getting their MBA, but not always. And I think this is a case where you need to do your research and definitely look at schools that are, have some maybe a capital markets lab or some kind of experiential learning that is going to help position you to be able to get an associate level position. And, at that point, you're going to hopefully from your internship get some experience that by the time you actually jump in, you're going to be performing that role, at the level that you'd be expected to as an MBA. And how is experience as a freelancer communicated well, especially from media marketing background? I think when you're talking about any experience, whether it's freelancer or volunteer work, whatever, I think you really want to talk about the results and what you learned and what you did and how that is going to be transferable or helpful to getting you to your post MBA goal. So I really don't think you should worry too much making a distinction about whether your work experience was freelance or, in actual more corporate environment, where you're a full-time employee. It's really just your ability to convince someone in the interview chair getting out of an MBA program that you have value to add to that next organization. I feel like before I jump in, Let me make sure. I feel like I've lost my panel of Stephanie and Josh and Puneet. So do you have any questions? Oh,
I do.
really quickly, because I think we're really running out of time. Yeah. Who has a
Yeah,
question?
I have a question for someone like more of a functional background rather than having a leadership background. How would I portray in the application for an MBA school for a candidate like that?
So in other words, how would you portray being leadership when you have more of a individual contributor role?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's where, you, again, the leadership can come from anywhere. So you can be like Stephanie and think about, where can I just jump in and maybe solve a problem? And so you can show your leadership in your extracurriculars. You can be in, again, organizing people to solve a particular problem. Like there's all this food that's like sitting out there and, people need to eat it and it needs some organization to get it done. That's leadership. Right. So don't just look to your job to show leadership.
Hey, Donna, I have a question. So, as we are still in this pandemic and in-person tour is not going to be available anytime soon, how do I guess, convince schools that, I am really interested or,
Right.
I want to go there rather than, because, I am applying to multiple schools, right? And I think, what's the best way to convince a show? And
Sure. That's a great question.
yeah.
And I would say what you need to do, and I'm sure you're already on the mailing list for all these schools, but you can really go deep. I mean, schools have really upped their game. That's one thing that's changed, and it's actually a case where I think the playing field is more leveled now, right? Because now, Puneet, it's just as easy for you to go research a school as it is for Stephanie, because you both can use the internet. You can both go on, Kellogg put a virtual tour online. Now you can both take the virtual tour without actually having to go. A lot of schools have ambassadors where you find someone. I encourage you to find someone that's like your doppelganger, someone that's sort of like you, like has a background like you and is trying to make a and it's more not necessarily that they're from the same country or that they're but that they have the same kind of work experience, same industry or same function, and that they're trying to do something similar, make a similar jump or transition. And then you can talk to that person and say, what were the clubs that were super helpful? Can you introduce me? So your goal when you have these conversations, and I think it's just a regular, it's like slow and steady wins the race. So it's overwhelming. Everyone can say, oh, talk to people at schools. And if you don't, and now, Josh, since you don't have to study for the GMAT anymore, anybody who tells you need to take more GMAT after just run from them. Okay. So you have time. And you just say, what, every week on Monday, I'm reaching out to I'm looking at 5 people that I think are interesting. I'm going to, email them, see if I can set up a coffee chat time. Maybe you have a regular standing thing where every Wednesday I just try to schedule coffee chats with somebody from a different school and I try to learn something. So every week I'm trying to learn a little bit more, and I'm trying to not just have that one-off conversation, but, maybe make the goal of that conversation. Let me find out if they can tell me one more person who's in the technology club or who's in the sustainability club who can tell me a little bit more about what they did. And you're creating a spreadsheet and you're, having your knowledge about things that are interesting to you. You can make sure that you're going online. All of the schools use, the CRM software where they know if you attended a webinar, you signed up, if you showed up. You're not necessarily going to be able to, sometimes schools will have like sort of smaller coffee chat or admissions chats. So you might be able to make a connection there. But, you can still, when I read someone's essays, I can tell if they've spent the time getting to know the school because they're referencing conversations they had with students. They've thought about how they can actually add value to a club going forward because they've had a conversation about what was happening last year. So that's what you can do. You have to just do that. And I think it'll show in the specificity of your answers when you answer questions for schools. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure. Stephanie, do you have any other questions?
No, I think this has been super helpful. I can't think of anything right now.
Okay. So then for all of you, let me also leave you with this, because I think this is something that, in a way, applying, and I applaud you all for being so willing to put yourself out there and, be on out here talking about your personal situation. That takes courage, and this is like I said, a tough year. Don't take any of these schools' rejections personally. If you get, and hopefully you're going to get some acceptances, you're going to get some rejections. Remember that these schools, they have their mandate, and sometimes it's, gosh, we want to have a bigger presence on the West Coast, so we're all of a sudden prioritizing people who maybe worked in the West Coast and are now applying to East Coast schools. Or maybe, and this is where, when you look at the class profiles, you can try to think about, okay, Stephanie, you're a female. There aren't as many female candidates in the pool. Let me look at schools that actually have lower percentages of women in the class, because we know those schools really are going to look long and hard because they feel very badly about the fact that there are not as many women. Let's see. I was just pulling some of this. Washington Foster actually had a 9% drop in women. So all of a sudden, they actually have some really interesting retail resources. So that might be a school to look at. Keenan Flagler is still at 29% of women. I know they're trying to move that needle, but they just haven't yet. So they're going to look long and hard when they see women. If you have a finance background and a school like Kellogg, who historically hasn't had as many people recruit in finance, yet they never want to drop below a certain percentage. You might, when you're applying to Kellogg with a finance background and knowing that you want to continue in finance, you're going to stand out a little bit more in that pool with the exact same scores than you would at Booth, where they're going to obviously have more people in their pool. And likewise at Booth, if you want to do marketing and you want to do marketing analytics, they have this the Kilts Marketing Center. Stephanie, that's another one for you to think about. You might pop there. So understand your profile and what it is that you might have that school needs more of, but also understand that if you're not successful, it's not because you're unworthy or that you cannot achieve your goals. So separating your self-worth from what these schools say, if that's probably the biggest piece of advice I would give to all of you. Like, you all can do whatever you want to do. And, and some of these schools can help you get there faster, but you bring a lot to these schools, and they'd be lucky to have any of you. So always remember your worth and never let anybody else, and know that this is somewhat of I don't want to say it's a game, but it is what it is. Every school needs a certain number of this and that and whatever. And so a lot of this has more to do with that than, that your worth. It's not about your worth or a mandate or some kind of evaluation that somehow you're not good enough. So you're good enough. You all are amazing just the way you are. And never let any school take that away from you. And it's really what you do next. So whatever information you get, you just then make the next best decision going forward. So I hope that's helpful. And I feel for you, because it's not easy to put yourself out there and be evaluated and all of that. And you'll all be better if you just take the best of it and let the rest of it roll off you. Okay.
No, thank you so much, Donna.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Donna.
Yep. All right. So I think I can't tell. It's like it says last couple comments, and then I think we closed on that. I don't think I can. I don't think I can say anything more than that. So I don't know if anybody else has anything to add, or if they'll let us know. It says let's wrap. So I guess I'm wrapped. So yes, we're done. So thank you to everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I hope all of you learned something. And again, more than anything, I hope all of you stay healthy and safe and well.
Thank you.
So, all
Take
right.
care.
Thank you. Thank you all.